All right. So, welcome again to Love Over Coffee. This is a 31 night event to bring about awareness to the issue of domestic violence. And with that in mind, we are live on TikTok. We are live on the book on a page called Real Change, REEL Change, LLC 432 on YouTube. And I've got a couple of groups, and we are live in those groups as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do the countdown, and then I'll introduce the guest. All right. So I think we're both a little nervous because we don't know each other except from TikTok, and we know each other in a completely different facet, which I love. And we met just recently because we both were up way too late at night shopping on TikTok. And so, so this is Brianna Barton. She is a friend from the junk journaling community, but tonight she is our guest on Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard or Voices Now Heard. So, welcome, Brianna. Thank you for your courage for being here. I know that the road you've walked has not been an easy one. So, I am going to ask you the same question that I always ask everyone, and that is tell us who you are, tell us where you've been, and tell us where you're going. And of course, I always say, tell us what you feel safe and comfortable sharing. So, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Brianna, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence. Um, I really feel that I got into the situation before I even realized what was happening. I think that women in all forms of life can suffer domestic violence, no matter what you're rich, poor, young, old, you know. And for me, myself, I, felt like I was at the strongest point of my life. I, had my two daughters and was renting an apartment and needed a roommate because, I couldn't afford the whole rent. And so a friend said that he had a brother that, would be willing to do that. So he started out as a roommate and just like came off as the most genuine person, as they always do. you know um he he would be very kind and considerate, and eventually, the roommate situation turned into a relationship, and and then I was in for the fight of my life. So yeah, it happened pretty quick. I was surprised at how quick I got into the turmoil of the relationship. Um, just the hitting you and then saying that they're sorry, and and then the flowers, and then you don't really understand what's happening when you're in it. Like, it all happens just so quick, and then you believe you love this person and you want to save them. So in the early stages it's like that, where you really want to save them, and you can make a difference.
Well, and I often say, and I've dated guys who were basically a jerk and an asshole from the beginning, and I didn't, last very long. I basically dumped them before I got involved. But an abuser knows how to groom,
Yes.
and you end up um being so um enamored by them and their presence that when the table flips, that's what I call it. When the table flips, it's impossible to flip it back.
Yes.
Although we keep trying to flip the table back because that's what made sense to us for the longest time before the table flipped. And we can't
Exactly.
understand why the table flipped. It must be us. And they tell us it's
Yes.
us.
Yes. Yeah. And then I think you get really the chaos of that relationship becomes your normal. And so when it becomes your normal, you just it's hard to see anything. It's hard to see outside of that. For me, the abuse was bad. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that, when I did get pregnant by him, the abuse got even worse.
Yes.
And
I've
which
heard
was
that.
shocking to me, you know, and then of course, then the children, are at play and trying to leave the relationship because they always want to hold the child hostage, threaten to take the child, threaten to, um, they use the child against you.
As a
That
pawn. Mhm.
yes. And my girls and my kids suffered, terribly from him. And I remember the first time that I reached out and called police. It was already about 2 years into the relationship. And the reason why I think I never called police is because all my neighbors knew. Uh, People were very well aware of what was happening in my house. My pediatrician or my OBGYN knew. I was hospitalized while I was pregnant. You know, um, Everybody knew and did nothing. So I think that's why I never really had the courage to call the police because I didn't think anything would happen. And so one night, he had locked me in a room for like 6 hours with my kids on the outside and of the room and was basically holding me hostage and would come into the room, fight, and then leave the room. Well, I finally climbed out my bedroom window, ran as far as I could run. Mind you, my kids were still inside and knocked on this woman's door. I just remember her as the cat lady. Just had all kinds of cats around her apartment. So, on the door and, little flags and stuff. And so I thought that she would be safe. So called the police my very first time. And so after I called them, I went back to the apartment because my kids were there. And the police were already there talking to the abuser. And they tell me to come in and sit down on the couch. Well, he's sitting right there. And so they wanted me to come in and sit right next to him. And so I complied. And basically, what he said is that he held me against my will because I was threatening to commit suicide.
Oh my gosh.
Even though I had busted lip,
Right.
everything you could see, everything on me. They still, so all they did was just separate us. So really, at that time, I never called the police again. I can tell you that because at that point it was, and mind you, this was also in '94, so before the Nicole Brown Simpson happened.
But Brianna, I would like to tell you it's changed, but I know from current situations, it has not. It's almost like the more time you call the police, the more you're the problem. And the other individual starts to flip that table and say,
Yes,
well, she's this and she's that. And
yes, yeah, and they're very, and that's true. They blame you. they blame you because you're staying in it, right?
Right.
And yeah, so after that, I didn't call the police, and I ended up one night he almost killed me in front of my two daughters, and I realized that if I didn't do something, that my daughters were going to see me die. And when I woke up from that, the next day I went and got an order of protection, which leads me to a whole nother discussion of order of protections, because they don't save you. They it can there's a book by Gavin DeBecker that is called The Gift of Fear, and it's a very good book. I recommend anybody that's a woman get that book. It's really, really good, and he talks about how a lot of the women that have gotten restraining orders or orders of protection end up you know suffering the consequences instead of just making the plan to leave. you
That's
know
true. That's true.
that depending on that piece of paper isn't going to help you. you know and I have, I went through a lot even after I did that, but one of the things that really helped me was, um, I was seeing a therapist at Planned Parenthood, and it was for therapy, and she had recommended a book called Women Who Love Too Much by
Oh, wow.
Brianna
Yes.
Barton. That book is just an amazing book. That book made me see so much that I didn't understand. Like, we get in this cycle of abuse with our partner, and we don't understand why we stay. They beat you down so low that you're at the lowest point of your life, and you're struggling to find a way out, and you don't know how. you know um Reading that book really helped me understand that I can't fix him, that um really, honestly, to be honest with you, the physical abuse is nothing compared to the mental and emotional abuse that you carry with you forever.
Brianna,
Mm.
I can't disagree. Yeah. Because the
Yeah,
bruises heal, they go
yes.
away. And as I have mentioned in my own situation, there was no physical abuse in my situation. So um, that's another thing I want people to realize. You cannot equate someone's
Mm-mm.
abuse with your abuse, because I was only involved for 39 months, and I say only involved as though 39 months is nothing compared to someone else's 10 years, but it's
Yeah.
all relative, because it's basically abuse cuts to the very core of who you are. And if you are not careful, it cuts to the very core of not only who you are, but who you could be and who you have the potential to be, because it can stay with you for a very long time. And physical abuse is a hit that comes and goes, but the mental and the
Yes.
emotional anguish of I'm not good enough, and did I do enough, stays with you much longer.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. You know, um, I think that, and understanding that, why did I keep going back to him? Yeah, I had a child, but I had two daughters who were watching all this. They were old enough to know and to see me. And because he didn't physically hit them, I always justified it, and it wasn't until he suffocated me, and as everything went dark, my last words were, my daughters are going to see me die, like, and that's what gave me the strength to start getting out of the situation. And getting out is not easy. For me, I had to leave the state. And unfortunately, he followed. And then I left that state. And then he followed again. So, it's each abuse situation is different, but there's commonalities, within all of the abuse, you know. Um People would hold it against me. I lost friends. I had one of my best girlfriends sit down on a curb with me and say, "You need to choose him or me because I can't sit and watch this anymore." And my heart just broke because she was really the only one I had. And for her to tell me that was so devastating because you already feel so alone. No one knows what's happening in your home and what
Right.
you're going through,
And not
So
only are you lying about what's going on at home, but sometimes you find yourself protecting them.
yes, yes,
It's so
100%.
confusing.
Yeah, and the guilt that you feel and the everything, there's so many emotions that you feel because it's so complex. It's just not an easy thing. And again, doctors and police and people will say, why do you stay in it? Why didn't you leave? Why? Well, if it was that easy, we all would do it.
Right,
you
right,
know
right,
it's
right.
just it's too complex for that. And you know for me, I sat down in a park with him, and I said, what, I need you to let me go.
Mm.
I need you, to please just let me go. And he told me straight and I will never let you go. And I literally stood up, went to the phone thing and called for help and said, "I need help because either, he's going to take my life or I'm going to take my life because I can't take all this anymore." It was just too much, you know. And which helped the process of getting, once I left the state, there are a lot of things that are in play that can help you with keeping your address confidential.
Yes.
So you definitely need to take advantage of everything that they definitely have available now. But the scars that I carry are with my daughters, and my daughters witnessing all that, and unfortunately, have been in situations themselves. So I mean, I didn't ask for it. I didn't, plan on it, but that's where my road took me. And, the consequences, you know, continue on.
And that's a hard, it's splitting hairs because again, as much as one never chooses to be abused, you find yourself in situations where that is what's happening,
Mhm.
and your daily choices um, may not move you out of it and may actually, um, I guess, you know, escalate it in some ways. Um, and you don't know, as you said, you don't know what is up and what is down, what is in and what is out. I mean, everything is so confusing and the situation is so volatile that the least little thing will set them off, which then sets you off. And so the abuse and the reactive abuse can become very violent between two people, and that's when the police are often called. And sometimes at that time, and I am not one who will always take the police side for sure, but it's like he said, she said, who started it, who ended it, who finished it, who, and separating you. I mean, that's what happened in Gabby Petito's case. They basically separated them for the night,
Yeah.
and the next day they got back together. And between getting back together and carrying on with their trip in Utah, she suddenly was gone.
Yeah.
He went back to the state, and we find out later that at some point in time he murdered her, and then he ended up killing himself. There is no easy solution,
No.
and every solution has, I guess I want to say, restrictions. Sometimes you call an abuse shelter and there's no room. What do you do? What if you're being financially controlled? That's where I think people forget that when you're in an abusive situation, your brain is impacted. You get to where you can barely process simple things, let alone how the hell to get out of an abusive situation.
Yes.
And if you have no finances to get out of the situation, what do you do? The resources are not out there. The resources are not there to just take you out of the home and put you in a hotel and protect you endlessly. It's just not out there. And the shelters are packed. They don't allow you to take a dog. They have restrictions. And so many people end up, as you did, going back. So that brings me to a question, Brianna. How many times did you leave or attempt to leave and actually go back?
Too many to count.
Yeah.
And that's the most frustrating part, because then you feel like you get real strong and you get the oomph to say, okay, this is it. This is going to be the day. And then, unfortunately, that your self-esteem is so battered and so down, that, and you want to say again, women who love too much, you feel, they make you feel like you're the only one that can save them, so it's your fault that they beat you, but you're the one that can save them, and you start to believe that, you start to believe that the abuse is your fault. I caused it. And then, if I leave, then, so yeah, normalizing how many times a woman goes back is so important, because I would hate myself for going back, and I would hate myself for continuing to try. And I didn't understand that it's a cycle, that the average, woman leaves 7 times before, she actually leaves. And then you get everyone's judgment, right? So you're already dealing with
You're
all
already
this.
isolated, and then and as much as your friends and your family and even strangers and coworkers can love you, they also cannot love you out of the relationship, and
Yeah.
they cannot love you into making a different decision, because again, the cycle of abuse is just that, a cycle. And like I have told a friend just recently, um, you don't have to leave the house to put yourself first, but until you put yourself first, you'll never leave the house. It's like knowing you have to put the mask on, the airplane on yourself first before you can save your children or anyone else. And yet your children are the most important thing, and yet you have to still save yourself first before you can save your children. And again, that is so confusing. And yes, it is. There's an average of 7, some people have said as much as 10 times, before you will break the cycle of abuse and leave permanently. But leaving permanently, of course, doesn't fix everything, because
No.
because then you still have the question, why did you stay? Why didn't you leave? Why did you stay so long? And at first you don't even know how to answer the question, because you never knew how to answer the question. um, fear, intimidation, obligation, guilt, all those things play into it. But when those things aren't there anymore, they're still there. You're still processing.
Yes.
So as you look back now, um, what what has your healing looked like, Brianna?
Well, my healing has been a journey. I I suffered from a lot of trauma even before him. So, it has definitely affected my health. And, so my trauma or my recovery from all of it is, it was interesting because as I was watching your podcast and I was thinking, wow, like I really, haven't done anything, like for me to get up in the day and get dressed and craft and, you know, uh, that is an accomplishment for me,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
So, I mean, I wish I could say that, I've done remarkable things and, have turned all of it into a positive. What I can say is that, I try to be there for my daughters and my kids the best that I can. I took, accountability for everything that happened that they witnessed, you know. I have met a wonderful man and I've been married for 20. I don't know how he came, it's that song, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers.
By
Because
Garth Brooks. Woo! I
I
love me
used
some
to
Garth.
I used to beg God to just please help me and help him. And that never happened. And, remarkably, I through reading books and especially Women Who Love Too Much, I was able to understand that we choose the partners, the chaotic partners that we choose. So when I met him, he was like unlike anyone I ever dated before. And it was hard in the beginning because I was so used to chaos, push
Mhm.
and pull. And he has never even raised his voice at me. He has never spoken an ill word to me, but in the beginning I used to like fight with him and yell and try to get him to yell at me, because that's what I was used to, the chaos of a relationship. And so learning, how to break the patterns within yourself is so important and in choosing the right relationship for yourself.
So for me, it wasn't Women Who Love Too Much. It was a I can recall the book. I started reading it while I was still in the relationship, and it was almost like his picture was on every page, and that was Psychopath Free.
Yeah.
Um, because it's another book about the people in our lives that are just basically toxic,
Yes.
strangers, friends, family, online, offline. There are just those individuals who are toxic, and for whatever reason, they manipulate triggers. It's when you first meet them, you feel compelled to tell everything, and then by telling everything, they remember everything, and that's the buttons they push to get you controlled and groomed and manipulated, the whole gaslighting, all of those tactics. And one night I am going to do an episode of just basically abuse tactics and what they look
Mhm.
like, and then also types of abuse. Because we've talked about financial and mental and emotional and what those can look like. So you talk about patterns of behavior and or actions, choices, consequences, whatever we want to call them within yourself. So Brianna, when you look back now, um, because so many times we get into relationships because we're leading with our own trauma.
Yeah.
I know for me, I was sexually molested at 10, um, craving attention, um, thinking that sex and love was somehow equated. Um, those are some things that have led me into relationships that weren't all that great. And then, of course, finally led me into the most abusive relationship ever in my life. But what about for you? What do you see when you look back?
Well, for me, it was, I really just trusted people too much.
Mhm.
Like
I could add. Let me add that to my list too.
yeah, I, and that is honestly the biggest thing that I struggle with to this day is learning to trust people that they're real and they're who they say they are and they don't have ill will, you know. That's why I surround myself with animals. you know,
Right.
animals just love you unconditionally and it's so pure and but honestly it was the way he presented himself. He presented himself to be too good to be true, and coming from the life that I came from, I believed it. And because we were roommates, I just, he showed, I mean, he had a mask on for a while.
Then they can.
Yeah. So they're in it for the long game.
Yes, they. And I've said that before. It's scary because while victims pray, pray, abusers look for prey,
Yes.
prey,
Yes.
and we don't want to believe that those people are out there,
Hmm.
but they are, and they
Yeah.
prey on the vulnerabilities and the insecurities and the weaknesses. At first, those are all the things they're attracted to, the
Hmm.
wounded spirit. But then
Yes.
the wounded spirit is exactly where they try to stick the blade and start twisting it.
Oh, yeah.
And you are you cannot imagine that someone would do that because it's not something that you would do. I mean, for
Hmm.
me it was such a foreign thing to be manipulated in the way that I was being manipulated that I just couldn't believe that it was happening. And for the longest time I couldn't see what I couldn't see, and then once I could see it I couldn't unsee it.
Hmm.
um but there can be a very long journey between seeing and then not being able to unsee it. um and that journey in itself can be that long road between leaving or not leaving until you finally leave. um and there is no there is no one answer for any
No.
person out there as to when that turning point will come. Brianna said it came for her when she realized what her children could witness. Um, so again, feel telling us what you feel safe and comfortable. How are the children doing? What do they, I guess, know and understand, and what do how have they processed all of this? Because it's a side that we don't often hear about. We hear from the perspective of the survivor, but we have to remember
Mhm.
that children are also survivors of domestic violence and they're
Yeah.
not the partner. So,
And I think that, children are, make domestic violence so complicated, right? Because, like for me, I all three of my children are different. My middle daughter is who I'm the closest with. And my son, I definitely struggle because you have to remember that there's two different DNAs in this human, right? There's the DNA of the father and the DNA of the mother. And so, you know, I think for the longest time, my biggest goal was to not allow my son to grow up to be an abuser or anything like that. You know, I left when he was young. You know, he was 2 when I left. And but unfortunately, I can see traits that are, you know, not the best traits, and that is very difficult to it's very difficult as a mother to, to see, so I'm not the closest with him, but um but with my daughters, all my kids, I definitely try to 100% be there for them. I've always taken accountability. uh they had, after that relationship, they had, very stable lives of not seeing any abuse or yelling or anything. It was like two completely different lives,
Mm,
but I think when there's kids and domestic violence, it's a real struggle to, especially if you have a child by the abuser, because they do like to use the children as pawns. And because we were not married, whoever, I don't know if it's like this in every state, but whoever has actual physical custody or the child in hand is who the child stays with, right? So if he was to take my son and leave, I would have to go to court and go through that whole process of everything. So those threats are very real in keeping
mhm,
you contained within that cycle of abuse, because
right.
you're already so low. Your self-esteem, your mind, everything is so low that you can't even comprehend another battle,
And
so
some like the battle. Some will use the legal system as a way to continue to
yeah.
torment and abuse. And then, of course, you have abuse by proxy. Abuse by proxy is when loved ones, friends, and family reach out to you on the behalf of the abuser as though you are somehow, why are you being so difficult? Why can't you just work this out? And it's a way to um continue to rub that devaluation of, it must be my fault, it must be something I've done, it must be, why can't I just forgive and go back and work it out? But I'm sure that Brianna found as well, and most of the time this is true, and again, not every situation is the same, but there is a lot of commonality, and that is each time you go back, usually the abuse worsens
Oh, yeah.
because they have figured out that really, to a great degree, um, you're unwilling to set a boundary and they have maintained control, and so they keep pushing the envelope to see how far they can push it. And sadly, um in some cases they can push it pretty far, and they can push it pretty far to silence a voice permanently. And there are a lot of issues with the legal system, not just from the police standpoint. And again, I never want to paint the blanket picture that everything is bad or everything
No.
is good. Um, but the judicial system, the legal system, it, the whole restraining order system, there are a lot of things that don't play out the way you think it will play
No.
out. Because when all it took in my own situation was, as soon as the judge said, well, if you still have a disagreement about property, then you'll need to sue her. Well, thank you for saying that, because for 5 years, that's exactly what he attempted to do. And the legal abuse continued for 5 years. And it was a nightmare. I mean, every time I turned around, there was some other legal process being filed against me. And it was just another way to maintain contact and maintain control. And when you're already exhausted, being exhausted on top of being exhausted does not help you heal.
No.
And so you're just like, what gives? And the system, they help them in so many ways. And the restraining order, as Gina mentioned on the first show and on the second one, if they have to stay 500 feet away, they'll stand at 501 feet away and taunt you, knowing where that line is exactly. And if they cross that line, they'd be arrested. But if they stand on the other side of the line, they know they can taunt you. And some will play the game for a really long time. So once you left, Brianna, other than the children, were there things that he said or did, or I guess, things he attempted to do to still control, other than the children? Or did he just...
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, after I left it, like I literally moved from Arizona to Washington State, and from Washington State to the East Coast. And, he followed, and and then, having to keep things in place, like, with the schools, with my son's school, and telling them, that if this person comes to try and take my son, that he's not allowed, and so you have to get the legal system involved in all the states, right? And then when I moved
Right.
back to Washington, same thing. He would just call and call, and just Washington State was actually really good for domestic violence. They really did. He actually went to jail. Well, he went to jail in Arizona too. And the protection order, he violated it. And it didn't matter. You know what he does? He goes in there, he takes an anger management class, he's out.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's
Right.
just, it's a joke, So
It's a
one of the
slap on the
things,
wrist. It's a slap on
yeah,
the wrist many times. Yeah.
yes. One of the things that, when you had asked the question earlier, how one thing that I could have saw, oh, wait, hold on. I
I
lost
see
you.
somebody.
That's my husband.
Hello.
um, One of the things that was really early on is that I saw that could have been a red flag had I known,
Mm,
was that at first he was enamored that I was very popular among my friends.
mm, mm.
And then in a very short time, that became jealousy.
Yes. Yes.
So he became jealous of the relationships with my friends, and then would try to become that with my friends. And when that
Mhm,
didn't work, then he started making me pull away where I
mhm,
couldn't
mhm.
be a part. So I
Same.
think early,
Same. Hmm.
yeah, early on, that's like a really good sign to see that they they can get jealous of your life, and they want to infiltrate your life, but they're demented, so it's just not going to work, so then they start having you pull away from everybody, everyone you know, and then keeps you isolated.
Right. And again,
So,
I think that social media has added another layer of, and I know I am guilty of this as well. You know, when you're excited about something, you plaster it all over the place. And then when it's
mhm,
not exciting anymore, um, you don't want to tell anyone.
mhm.
And that need to hide what is not true anymore, um, that can be that moment of protecting them. It's like I was all
Yeah,
excited about meeting them, and I've met this great guy, and and you put it all out there, and
yeah.
then when it doesn't turn out to be so great, it's kind of like the puppy that grows up and is peeing all over the carpet. You no longer want to post the picture of the carpet anymore, even though you originally posted all the pictures of the puppy when it was cute. And that's another layer of, I know for me, it wasn't about necessarily revealing that he had become an asshole. It was also recognizing that he was. And
Yeah,
then also, but instead of putting it on him, I saw it as, I don't want to admit that I have failed once
yeah,
again in a
yeah.
relationship that seemed to be all that and a bag of chips and a cherry on top. And I didn't know how to I didn't know how to come back from um the big reveal that it wasn't all that. All that glitters
Mhm.
is not gold. And that controls you and grooms you in another way. And that's why I say, you know, for as much as we have to own our healing, we don't own the abuse. But that is such a fine line, because as you mentioned, Brianna, there's a lot of guilt, as a mother with children and what they had to see, and what you wish they had not seen. I mean, you can spend a lifetime beating yourself up about that.
I
So
do.
yeah, so I was going to say, that's one of those things that you have to forgive yourself. And my God, we both know that that's a daily process, because it's like, you know as much as society wants us to explain, why did you stay, why didn't you go, there are
Mhm.
days I still ask myself the same damn question.
Yeah,
And all I can come back to is, you know I loved the wrong person in all the right ways for all the right reasons. And letting go of the wrong person was the right thing to do. But letting go of all of the right ways to love for all the right reasons is
mhm.
not something I want to change about myself. So, when you look at the
Yeah.
person who was abused and you look at the person you are now, what did you keep? What was great about Brianna?
That I have a very loving heart, and I definitely, it hasn't made me not believe in people as far as, I have an issue with trust. Definitely have an issue with trust. But um I believe that, I have always just really, really cared about people. When you grow up without or in a traumatic kind of life that I did, you know, um, love is like something that I really strive to give. Like my heart is just a very giving, loving heart. And that can never change, like that is a part of me that was before and is now. Sometimes it's a curse.
That's another Garth Brooks song. You
Yes.
know, um, something about, I want to change the world, but I don't want the world to change me.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another Garth Brooks song.
So, but definitely, having grace for yourself, you know, having grace that you didn't get it perfect and you went back and many things happened. But, if you knew what you knew now, you could go back and save yourself, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. And what I'm seeing now is younger and younger people getting in domestic violence situations.
And we have a young woman coming up next week. And she was involved in a relationship at 19, and is just now 23. And it was from what I can gather, a rather short lived situation. But it was a little bit like Carol, who's watching on the book. Um, it was very volatile from the very beginning, kind of bizarre and crazy from the beginning, as a teenage relationship. And I think we're taught a lot of things about um, young relationships that we again accept as normal. You know,
Mhm.
the jealousy and all of those things.
Yes.
And, some young girls and young boys can go through those major phases of jealousy toward others, whether it
Yeah.
be friends or other people you've been involved with. And that brings us to another whole level of the whole sexting issue,
Yes.
stalking behavior, because stalking is another form of violence. We don't often see it, but some individuals don't hit, but the mental and the emotional abuse comes from, I see you and I'm watching
Mhm.
you and I know where you are and I know where you work and I know where you live. And those can be, initially you don't want to take some of that stuff seriously. And then you realize that they really do know where you work and they really do know where you live. And they seem to know a lot of information about you that you didn't necessarily share. Um, and that can open up another whole, all of the restraining order again, trying to get something done. And, the police can stay one step behind a stalker.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's a scary place to find yourself. I'm going to give you a chance to collect any final thoughts you might have as we start to wind down. I am going to take a moment and just say, thank you again. I think you can probably wipe off the list that you haven't done anything grand with what you've lived through, because you just did. You shared with us very courageously and very bravely your story. And that's what needs to happen more often, as people become more comfortable with their story and how it has impacted their life and the lives of others. So I want to thank you, Brianna, for being on Love Over Coffee, Voices Now Heard. And before we wind down, um, from this podcast came a Love Over Coffee subscription box. It is activities, knowledge, it's items that help encourage and promote self love, self care in an effort to heal trauma. And it comes, like I said, in the form of a subscription box. The box is quarterly right now. I would love to increase the subscription. Right now, I am still in the process of just nailing down all the logistics of the box. So, patience for you, as someone waiting on a box, is necessary, because like this time they stopped making the box I had been using. So I've had to order new
No.
boxes. It's like, what happened to my supplier? Who are they? Where'd they go? But if you're out there and you're interested, it's 30 cups of coffee. And we use that phrase instead of that other word, currency, because, the tiki talk doesn't like that. And so 30 cups of coffee. It's monthly, or I'm sorry, it's quarterly. The October box has not gone out yet because we're waiting on the boxes. But when they do get here, then the box will all be put together. It comes with a variety of items. This particular box is focused on healing the inner child that didn't necessarily know how to deal with the trauma that occurred to them. And basically, they have developed their own coping skills, good or bad. And that is what they are putting out in the world. And so oftentimes we meet each other at our trauma level. And as we said last night, hurt people, and healed people heal others. And so hopefully that box is a way to start that process in the privacy of your own home. You don't have to announce it to everyone, but it's one of those things where literally just taking a moment to breathe, relax, and say an affirmation is enough to get you going in the right direction for your day. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out to me privately or comment. There's a pinned post about the boxes. And like I said, right now I only have 20 subscribers. The box is mainly paying for itself at this point. Because basically everything that's coming into it is going right back out in it. But eventually, I would love to be able to actually make some money with it so that the resources can be given to domestic violence shelters or some organization or something. And I'm looking into my own nonprofit, but my own healing has to catch up as well. So don't get too excited yet, but eventually we'll get somewhere with all the things that that my brain is occupied with. I do want to give Brianna a chance to give us a final thought, and so we'll take it away. Go ahead, Brianna.
Final thought is just that don't judge yourself if you're in that position or have been in that position. That try to have faith that you will find a way out. And again, if you're a woman or a man, but mostly women, The Gift of Fear is a very good book. And I would encourage anybody that's in any kind of dysfunctional relationship, get Women Who Love Too Much by Robin Norwood. It's an amazing book.
And there comes that time when no matter what the label is for the individual who is abusing, whether they are toxic, narcissistic, they are physically violent, alcoholic, doesn't matter.
Yes.
At some point, saving yourself is more important than trying to figure out how to save them. And this is a really tough question, but at some point, if saving yourself isn't enough to get out, then why? Why are you not willing to save yourself?
Yeah.
Because that is what leads you to the healing. Not taking responsibility for the abuse, but taking the responsibility for why you would not value yourself more. And that is a harder thing to look in the mirror and see sometimes. Mm-hmm. And That's that fine line. That's that fine line between how do you get out and how do you start to heal without taking responsibility for what they have done to you, but instead what you need to now do for yourself that you had expected them to do and they were unwilling to. And through their toxicity, they have wore you down. And so at some point, yeah, putting the mask on yourself to save yourself on the airplane, that's a hard question. So
Mhm.
I will leave you with this has been another night of Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard, Voices Now Heard. This is for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And my name is Tina Durbin. I am the podcast host. And tomorrow night, we do not have a guest, but we may. But I'm waiting on a confirmation. If we don't have a guest, I will replay a prior episode. So please let me know if there's someone out there who is interested. But if not, I have a prior podcast that I will replay, and it is a good one. So thank you, Brianna, for being our guest this evening. Thank you to everyone out there who listened and who watched and who liked and who gifted, who shared. I really appreciate it. 20,000 likes gets us to the FYP. I should say that at the beginning. And of course, I'm changing the gift every night. Seven. Um, seven hand hearts for the seventh night. Um, Angel, what do you want me to post? You're saying, please post those. What are those? The books, the subscription box. What is it? I need to. Oh, the books. Okay, I will. We will post those. I'll put together a little video of the gift of fear, psychopath free. Women who love too much, and there's another one, power, overcoming a narcissistically abusive relationship, and it is quite powerful as well. So I'll put together some top books of what Brianna talked about tonight, and also what I know. And thanks again. So tomorrow night, we'll see you back here at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And thank you for coming out and supporting one of our own from our community. Again, Brianna, thank you for being so brave and courageous. And as someone over here, Miss Letitia says, you're so brave, Brianna. And we've got some other, thank you, great podcast. Thank you, everyone over here on TikTok. We've got, let's see. Thank you, Tina and Brianna. Thank you for sharing. Great testimony. So we've got some great things, and I'll post a couple of highlights from tonight's chat and interview. I don't like to call them interviews, but TikTok does. So. All right. So let me go ahead. I'm going to end the podcast on TikTok first. Moderator. So, my friend is saying I also need to thank the moderators. Sue, Nicole, Pink Iguana, Angel, and Cat Links. Those are my 4 moderators. I have a little peanut gallery in the back of me that's telling me, don't forget to thank the mods. I know. I created a little waterfall to give myself notes. But do you think I have it where I could see it? No, I buried it on the craft table underneath a million things. So, all right. So thank you, everyone, for hanging out. We'll see you back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. I may be live later working on some crafting just to clear the brain. But thanks again, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, everybody. Bye. All right. So there's that podcast, the TikTok. And let's see. Thank you to everyone on the Real Change page. Thank you, Carol and Letitia, for watching. I'm sure we have some other people, but they maybe didn't comment, so I appreciate that. Thank you again for your love and your likes and your support. And we'll see you back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to end the stream on the book now and in all the other places.